So welcome to Coffee with Developers. Dan, you can stay as well. Why not? Like, let's do a Coffee with Developers with 3 people. Why not? If you have some ideas to talk to Elena about. So one thing we planned this to be a talk about what's happening at Penpot and what's happening with the new rendering engine that you're doing. So
Mhm.
give us an overview of what that actually means. Like why reinvent rendering in the browser? Is the DOM that bad?
Well, this is discussion started at the company like way before I joined the company. I'm joined on February this year, so like a lot of decisions and a lot of concerns that people had at the time, yeah, happened like, let's say, a year ago, more or less. So um, it's like a lot of design tools are currently using the canvas for rendering stuff. I mean, there's like, this is the way of doing things. Like, we've been working on, like, I mean, we as a humanity have been working on graphics for a long time, and having a canvas, having a context where you can like render shapes and have control over what you are rendering directly, is it's just something that is like standardized somehow. So as yeah, I mean, and this technology has been applying for, I don't know, map rendering for a lot of time. So any kind of application that uses maps uses a canvas where with a WebGL context. And this is evolving as well. So there's WebGL, but more engines are also coming to the party. So yeah, that's fine. So yeah, I mean, Penpot uses an SVG related render, and one of the things that people were asking a lot was about, can you like improve performance? Because at some point, when you have a huge design with a lot of elements, it's something that, I mean, you want to people to do whatever they want on the platform. So we don't want to limit in that sense. So it's true that a lot of performance improvements have been done in the past. Like, for example, you don't render, I don't know a lot about this because I have not worked on that render ever, but I've seen it a little bit. So basically what happens is that for some pieces of what you are seeing in your design, it's what you see is like a thumbnail. It's a picture of what it is there. It's not the SVG itself, because it's very expensive to keep rendering all of the time. And when you have a design, you are interacting with that. So shapes are moving, things have to be re-rendered, and that's expensive. So basically, that's one of the reasons why we are working on just like keeping all the definitions as they are. Like, anything of it is gonna change. All of this is the same. So for in terms of, let's say, look and feel, for the users, there's gonna be no difference. There's no difference. In any case, it can be better, because for some scenarios, you are not like rendering a static image itself. Everything is interactive, right? So I worked a long time ago in a company that was actually like rendering maps stuff, and there's like a famous sentence that is like, raster is faster but vector is corrector. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but right now it's not that way, because raster can be super fast, raster can also be correct somehow, so it depends a lot. And also it's true that now we have like better technologies that make vector rendering, let's say, like that, like faster as well. So yeah, I mean, things evolve, and it's like a never-ending discussion somehow. But yeah, so we've been working on this month is basically to migrate all of the things that we have in the current render to the new render, which is basically draw everything into a canvas using a 2D graphics library, so you can interact with it on a very smooth way, and we can like rocket the amount of shapes or elements that you can render on your design, basically.
So
That's like a summary.
you're using the live canvas in the thing, or an output canvas and an off canvas to actually do the animations and stuff. because that was always the thing when I did games. Like basically
Mhm.
the live canvas in the browser was always just a display of the one where I did the calculations, because then it didn't cause a re-render in the browser.
No, I mean everything is being rendered directly in the canvas, but we are like evolving the way we are rendering things there. So it's for us, it's not like just put it there and the browser or the canvas handles it. But in our case, for example, we are using a tile system, which is not implemented by the library that we're using. It's something that we are doing by ourselves, which is basically to divide the canvas on different tiles, um, and decide how to render, decide what to render. So if it's out of the view box, we don't render it. By we For that purpose we use like very simple intersection checks. Like if the bounding box it's inside the viewport, then we re-render it. Also, the order in which the shapes are being rendered as well. So we have some logic behind the scenes to do that, but it's all happening like let's say in real time. So what you see is what you're doing. There's nothing differently. It's true that for these tiles, each tile, um, I mean, we can go like deeper into that part later. I don't want like to overwhelm people a lot at the beginning, but basically each tile can be cached. So it's true that you don't need like to re-render it every time. We use a library which is called Skia, developed by Google, and it's the one that they use for let's say all of their products and so on, and it's being widely used on other products. Is open source, and it allows you to create what we call surfaces, and you can like handle what happens in a surface. So you don't need like to render everything all the time. You can like select or say what you want to render and how, and cache the tiles. I mean, if you're, for example, only working on a shape that is contained into a tile, you don't need like to re-render anything or to recalculate everything else. It's gonna be like just static as it is. So yeah, we are, and this is something that we are evolving, like how we are deciding what to cache and what not. What are the most expensive functions when it comes to recalculate shape positions? Because it's something that also happens, like in a design tool, for example, if you are implementing a grid layout or a flex layout, which are concepts from CSS or web development, it means that you're touching, you are designing a shape, but then the rest are moving, right? So how do you calculate like which other shapes are involved into that rearrangement? So yeah, it's like knowing what happens and knowing when you have to render things. Also, not to create that kind of feel where things are a bit like, oh yeah, we are rendering. Like you want it to be as smooth as possible, but keeping like a smooth interaction.
Hmm. I mean, we had like tile engines before, like Leaflet and these kind of things that were used in
Yeah.
Google Maps and Yahoo Maps back then. And that was the whole idea. Like the problem that I always found with like Canvas is like it's pixel based and it's a fixed
Hmm.
size, so you basically have to render into it. And with the DOM, you keep the state on the elements. Like you basically you can do an undo, you can do a redo. With
Hmm.
just a canvas rendering, you need to simulate the state or store it somewhere else. So doesn't that mean
Exactly.
that there's a lot of like state somewhere else that uses a lot of memory rather than just like helping with the rendering?
Yes, I mean, there are two sides here. So one is what I mentioned about the surfaces in Skia. So each surface has like its own memory managed and is isolated from the rest. And at the same time, yes, we handle a render state manually. Basically, so on each update, we decide what is updated into that state and what's not. And we do, and the way that we have decided to do it, and it was, I mean, I say we, but I don't know exactly like why we took that decision, but they tested like a lot of stuff and it was like the best outcome for what we wanted to do. So we knew that we wanted to use like WebAssembly in order to be able to run that in the browser directly and be able to use Rust as a language to manage all of that situation, like not only the painting of features, which is something that relies on Skia, but how we manage all of that state and all that communication between our model and like all of the definitions that we have for shapes, for colors, for all of that, and how we interact with the our API, let's say, and the information that we are storing in the state. So basically, when anything happens, what we do is to send that information by memory, serializing it in bytes, basically. So when you send the information about a color, we convert it to like a binary format. We store it in a buffer and we send it, and then we release it. And we deserialize it on the Rust code. And then this is like the information that is translated and that is prepared to be sent or to be used in the Skia library. So we know that Skia handles the colors in that specific way or whatever. So we are receiving that in that format, we serialize it, and we build what Skia needs to fill that rectangle that I've just drawn, let's say.
I just want to jump in there because when you're saying about color, I know it's a slight side point, but it's it's my own personal fascination. But I remember about 2 years ago, I was using Adobe XD for something. It was a mock-up of a UI, and I got frustrated with it. I'd used Figma, I'd moved over to this, and I'd actually sent a tweet at the time to I think the product manager of Adobe XD, and I said something like, "How have I just realized that in Adobe XD there's no color management?" So there was no color management whatsoever. So I would have this beautiful color palette, and then I would export it and everything was off, And I was saying to them, this is the big reason that I wasn't going to use Adobe XD as opposed to some of the other ones out there. Has that come up? Because the person at the time responded to me and said, this might seem simple, but trust me, engineering something like this is unbelievably complicated. That's the only reason we don't have color management. So how does Penpot kind of handle things like color?
Yeah, in that sense, or at least what I know about it, because I think that there are many layers that I'm not aware of that. But basically, what we have like our own definition of what a file holds. So file has like all the things, like all the let's say like you have a rectangle which is a shape of that kind, and that has those children and that has those properties. So in the end, the color, or because color can happen on many places, like it happen like in the fill of a shape, in the stroke, in the shadow, like in many places, right? So what we do is to store it in a specific format. So basically, when you take a look at a Penpot file, you can see a JSON that has like all the information in that way. So you can export it, you can like then import it as well. And this is being like built and saved all the time. So yeah, you interact with the color over a specific thing, and this is saved where it has to be saved. Of course, it has evolved during the time. So maybe at some point, I don't know, let's say a shape was not in like getting the correct color from its parent or whatever. So it's something that has evolved. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. We also have like at Penpot, one of the things that I really like about is like it tries to follow standards as like a way of working. So for us, for example, being able to let the designers to have a design system and let you use the design system to what you are designing is crucial. And it works, I would say, and I'm not a designer, but I'm learning to use Penpot as part of my job. And it's like, it's so intuitive. Like, how can you pick up a design system and say, okay, so I want that component to use this color that I defined here, or this component that is on that way, or then change it to another palette or something like that. So yeah, the way it handled is for a designer, I think that is pretty intuitive. And on the developer side is very, let's say, there's a lot of granularity. Maybe I would say there is a lot of granularity. If I have to pick a word, I would say that, because there's a lot of things or different things that you can do in terms of colors. Like, for example, a shape can hold many colors. It's not one thing, like one shape, one color. You can have many colors that are combined into a single one, but those are different layers and they are stored like in an array or a list of colors. And then at the same time, we have things that, for example, are not like, and this is an ongoing discussion, like, for example, strokes. You can have like multiple strokes on a shape or also on a text, which is something that maybe it's not that common, but you can have different strokes of different kinds with different feels or with different colors. So yeah, in the end, it's like, let's pick a standard that anyone can understand and build it with a certain grade of granularity, and then we can like parse to each shape. I don't know if that answers the question.
There's some really smart stuff happening there, actually, because I think the multiple strokes is, I know you said it's not used that often, but you know, when you see that big, the only way I can describe it is the big 1970s text that was always like a really thick border around it. And then you have another, and actually when you try and do that in some of the other kind of graphic software, it's quite, it's a little bit awkward, and it involves you kind of going into your appearance and restacking things and actually just being able to have it as a feature.
Actually, yeah, I can tell you like a lot of things about strokes right now, but basically, it's funny because, for example, on CSS, you cannot add a stroke to a text. Like you can, but you can add multiple. And like I remember that the way of doing this is like just use a drop shadow. Like I think it's called differently. Like, and then so it's like a solid shadow that mimics the stroke, and you can have multiple, and you can also like add some effects onto that, right? So when we were like trying to implement that in the new render, because in the SVG you can, like, that's okay. So and the downside of it is when you add this style to SVG, the text is no longer a text element, it's an SVG, because you have to add like all of this and you lose like the meaning of the text. It's good for design, but you cannot do like a title out of it, a title of a website, because it's not a text. Like you have to handle it well, but it's not a text. So in this case, for example, we were thinking about maybe we can do like CSS and like do shadows somehow. Like let's follow like the trick for that visual effect, because as I said before, we are using Skia, and Skia has its own API. So you may be wondering how Skia handles it, because that's the first thing that you ask yourself when you're going to implement a new feature, right? In our case, it allows you to create a text stroke, but only one, because this is like the standard thing, right? Like you can only like, why would you want multiple strokes? So it's like, do you think we can do a shader? Like you start to get creative, you know, with that things, because as a graphics library, it uses WebGL, and the API allows you like to create custom shaders. Like the shader is like this piece of code that allows you to tell you like, in this pixel I want this, and in this pixel I want the other thing, and I want to propagate the color in that way, which is a very common thing on graphics computing. But in this case, Skia allows you to like to create your own stuff, and actually for shadows they use custom shaders for that purpose, but they abstract you of that implementation. But like if you want, you can extend the functionality with that. But what we ended up doing for that purpose was like, okay, let's just create another text that is going to be shown like only in the border, and that's it. But it's like, okay, but I don't want like to have a lot of shapes one on top of the other, right? So in the end, what you have to do is like to blend them into the same surface. So yeah, you start to draw them, but it's not only like about the amount of strokes that you have to draw, but like strokes can be outer, inner, or center strokes. Okay, so you have to handle also that property, and it's a property of the stroke element itself. So in this case, you have to use blend modes to like, okay, so I create this part and then this part, and then I scrub it or blend it or apply a different filter. So you have to go to the Skia documentation, know how you want to crop it, and then build it. So, and sometimes you ask yourself, if this is not a standard, why are we doing it? But it's like, as part of the development of the new render, we want to like cover the same functionality that it's currently working. In most of the cases, they may be like some corner cases, but what we want from a user's perspective is like it's the same. Like you can have your multiple stroke text here, and it's gonna work after the migration.
Do you feed back to Skia because it's open source? So it's like that use case might be something that other people need as well, or
that specific thing, I haven't found like anything related. Maybe in some like forum somewhere, but in general, people like suggest like to create your own shader. This is like a common one, but I haven't seen. I think that maybe there are some discussions about adding some kind of effect to the stroke. I mean, to the single stroke itself, because what Skia allows you to do to the stroke is just like the size and the color, but you cannot use, for example, an image in the stroke, and we allow that at Penpot. So you can have stroke or something and have an image on that. So we also have to support it. Yeah, it's really funny actually. I really love that part.
it's a bit like a border image in browsers, which is not yet completely integrated as well. Like there's so many things in there that actually don't work the way we want them to at the moment. One thing that when I worked on in Mozilla, we did Bespin, which was like a text editor that used Canvas to basically do 10,000 lines of code without slowing down, kind of thing. Much like Z is another editor that uses that right now. And of course, the biggest problem that we found was text rendering, and even more text interaction. Like one of the things, one of the first use cases on the Penpot website is like that. That a designer, a developer, and a copy editor can actually work together on a design. Now, finding the range inside a text that is highlighted with your mouse on a canvas has been the bane of my existence for a few weeks. How did you solve that problem?
Actually, this is one of the parts that is being developed. So in that case, like we are not yet directly interacting with the canvas itself. So there's going to be like a layer of an element, which we call like the text editor, which is an independent piece. And we are like thinking about how are we going to integrate it, as you say, to look as smooth as possible. It's true that the Skia API has like a lot of ways of giving you the information about where the text is placed, where the glyphs are placed. So basically, when you use it, what you have to build, first of all, is like a paragraph, and the paragraph can have different lines. And as you change the container of the text, all of these calculations change as well. So then you have more lines. So how do you interact with that? It's true that it gives you like the precise information about where things are placed. Like you can get it like even glyph by glyph. So yeah, that's gonna be a challenge. Yeah, because right now it's like it works as it works in the other render, right? Like there's like an external component that is it's over what you see, so you can interact directly with that, and then this is translated into the render. So this is gonna be a challenge for many reasons, like because of for fonts, like at least Skia does a really good job in here, but we have found like small details that we need to understand better and to tweak a bit, because it's like, for example, when there is an emoji, which is like, well, emojis is like it's a big thing. It's like, how do you calculate like the real width of the emoji, and how, like, where do you place it, how do you select it, as you said, and also because it's true that in this case it depends on the emoji font that you are using, but it's not the same font as the font that you're using for text. So the way of or you can have like multiple fonts in the same text. So like you have to know how to place them all together depending on the part of the text that you are editing. So yeah, it's I don't know how to say it, but it's hard. It's hard.
Then you got the difference between emoji on Windows and emoji on Mac. Like there's this, and on Linux, if that's even supported, I don't know. But like it's a really messy thing to do. I mean, I love that people get very excited about emoji, but it's not surprising that most social media platforms come up with their own emoji picker and don't allow you to just copy and paste whatever in.
Actually, we have a plugin for that, because I mean, we at Penpot there is a plugin API, and people can submit their own plugins and so on. And there is one only for what you have said, like to have an emoji picker, because like this is sometimes like the easier way of doing it. But the real challenge with this, I don't know why emoji are like always like a hot topic, let's say. I think that because we all interact with emoji. But what you have mentioned, so different platforms have their own emoji fonts, and this is like very it's kind of a personal brand somehow. So they're not going to be they're not going to get rid of them. There's never going to be like a standard emoji thing. So basically, the current render, it just renders what the browser is. If you're working on Firefox, on Windows, you're going to see one kind of emoji. But if you open it in a different browser with a different operating system, you're going to see something different, right? Because it fallbacks to whatever the browser decides to do. And the browser has been handling this for forever. And it remembers me a bit the IKEA post about it, which explains that a little bit, like the font fallback, right? So in our case, Skia doesn't know anything about the browser or like about the fonts being used or whatever. So what we are doing for now is to just use the no-to color emoji, which for a lot of people is so ugly. And yeah, I know that for me it's not, but I know I like neo-brutalism, so I just can't talk about design. But so basically what Skia allows you to do is like, okay, so this is like the font that I'm going to use primarily, and then you can send different kind of fonts into a stack, and Skia is always going to try to fall back into the font that is going to allow it to render the actual character, the actual glyph, to be more precise, right? So what we do is to put this font at the end. So when there is an emoji, it says, okay, this is the font that I can use for emoji. It means that at some point you can like load the font that you want to render emoji, because it's going to be on top of the note to emoji. So the idea is that since you can like load fonts, you can somehow tweak that, which is something that a lot of people may want. But I can understand also like why, for example, like, well, I know other platforms or other, not platforms, but applications develop their own font emoji only for their application, just to get rid of this, of it, because it's so hard. And actually, this is going to allow us to, for example, in Penpot, you can like export your design into a PDF or into an image. And what it does underneath is what I think that almost I don't know, a lot of people use for that, which is to run a headless browser, to run a Puppeteer. I'm sure that a lot of people have heard of it. A lot of resources use it for web image or PDF rendering. And yeah, the problem with that is that you have to tell that browser, let's say, which is the emoji font it has to use. But in any case, it's not going to use what you're seeing in most cases. So you're going to get disappointed and you're going to say, why my emoji don't work when exporting? And it's because it's a browser thing. So with a new render, the idea is to print or to export what you're seeing. And in that case, yeah, it's more complex from our side because we cannot rely on the font fallback of the browser, but at the same time, it's better for the user because they are going to see what they are actually doing.
And you want in the design tool to actually design things that look like
so, exactly.
There is differences in rendering, especially when it comes to strokes between canvas and SVG as well, as you said, like inner, outer, and middle stroke, and like the stroke end being rounded in canvas and not rounded in SVG. Do you see this as a challenge right now, that from the current renderer, are you reusing anything of the current renderer, or do you start from scratch?
Regarding the rendering part, is absolutely from scratch. About the format, what we have done is to like evolve some of the, or like improve the way that we are retrieving or we are like sending the information, so it's more compact or more limited or whatever. In the specific thing of corners, I remember that because there's a request about why don't you allow to, for example, in strokes, not only round like the outer corner, but also the inner corner of a path, which means that and it's possible to do that on SVG. I've been like taking a look on that, and you have to be like very precise on that. But it's not like a standard thing, but it's something that you can do. So can you do that with the new render? I mean, you can do in that aspect, you can do whatever you want. The only problem is like the complexity and the need of doing it. So it's something that a lot of people are requesting. Well, maybe yes or maybe not. It always depends on what they're used to, like if other tools do it, or they just want to try out that and they don't have that feature. So there are things like the caps that you were mentioning that maybe are more like standard, that I wanted to end in an arrow or whatever. And then there are others like the rounding thing that maybe if I don't know, maybe there's like something that has come up recently and it's more standard. But I think that it's more a specific thing, like having a setting to allow you to round the inner corner of a shape. Maybe it's more specific, but I've seen issues filled with that request. So hard, but not impossible to find, I would say.
I mean, there was a discussion in the CSS world, wasn't it, when people talked about like proper rounded corners, and basically like the inner one has to be another element with another radius than the outer one, because it's not just lesser than that. You have to do the proper trigonometry about it, and like that's where people went down that rabbit hole, and I guess that's where these pull requests come from as well. Now, when it comes to contribution to Penpot, I talked to your colleague about this as well. Like right now, you're using Closure, which is a very exciting, interesting. I don't know how that happened, but it seems like that it works, and we don't change it. Now you're going to go to a different thing. And you said, like before, using WebGL and WebAssembly and Rust. That's quite a specific skill set. Do you actually consider outside contribution, or do you expect outside contribution to the renderer as well, or do you get outside contribution already?
I mean, I think that we don't have any contribution yet because it's not something that is like in production. So you can see what we are doing because it's open, and we are actually like tagging the pull request or the changes that we are doing regarding the rendering. We are tagging it with new render, so anyone can take a look at the discussions or at the pull requests that we are doing. So it's true that it's like too soon for someone like to contribute directly to some specific feature because it's not released yet, but anyone can take a look, or if they are curious, like we're trying to also improve our internal documentation on that project, as it started like with a very, at the beginning, it was very experimental, and I really like that approach. I mean, when I entered, like the basic things were already like working, like not everything, for example, we had some strokes, we also we didn't have text at that time, so but like the basic structure was done, and I really like the approach of like okay, let's get things done, let's evolve, and as soon as we have something that we can like start working from, then let's improve it, because then you have like something you can see, or that you can touch, you can show to others, you can test. So yeah, for example, at the beginning, we didn't have like a tile rendering system. It happened like when I joined the team, a couple of my teammates started working on that. So it's like, yeah, right now it's more stable, and we are I mean, the idea is to announce when it can be tested. So if anyone can or want to look at it or do contributions or whatever, I mean, they can always like take a look at our repository, at our pull request, etc. But yeah, it's like, I think it's too early for, I don't know, bug fixes and so on. But if anyone is interested, I welcome them.
It's
I
really,
love
it's,
that you're documenting in public as well. That's basically I mean that's interesting. I can see you got lots of issues and pull requests as well. So there's lots of stuff happening there. So that's great to see, because that to me is an open source project that basically gets from the outside things there. And we're going to put these links under the video later on as well, and so you can actually start playing with it as well. And there's everything is documented, and you can start playing with it. And I love to see all the things back, like Emscripten. I remember when that was a big thing to actually just get apps into the web. And yeah, but it's so. You said you're from a back-end developer background. So what languages did you write before, and how did you get into Rust and WebAssembly?
Well, I was working with Python. I was at a company that was doing real-time analytics, so I was basically into Python and SQL for real-time things. So it's like completely different in a lot of ways into that. But from my point of view, as I said before, I have somehow a generalist profile, so I'm not afraid into jumping into like new languages or nothing, because I know that I can learn as I go somehow. So in this specific case, I also had like some background on frontend and on doing also WebGL stuff. So it wasn't like that strange to me on that sense. So and it's also like in the end it's a product, and it's an open source product. So this is something that I really like. Is like, okay, the tools that I'm using are a tool, but what I want to focus in isn't on the development of the product itself and how it looks at the end, how people interact with it, what people need. So yeah, in my case, I had no idea about Rust and Clojure before joining the company. But for example, one of the things that we are doing is that we are having an online course on Rust, for instance, and you do that at your working time, because it's like, I think that almost none of the current team have used Rust in production before. So it's new to all of us, and we are learning together, which is really nice. Like when someone is like, I know that this is better for this, and we have a discussion about that. So it's a perfect opportunity for learning a language, because you're learning it in a real thing. And I love it, because sometimes it, or at least for me, I cannot like just read a thing, memorize it, and then learn it. I need to, I don't know, do stuff. So sometimes it's hard like to pick a side project or a toy application to learn it. So for me, it's like an excellent opportunity, because you're learning. I mean, and you're making mistakes, but people are going to tell like, okay, this is wrong. What are you doing here? I also am recently using Copilot a bit for. It's true that for this ecosystem, it's really hard for AI tools to understand or to accomplish certain specific work. Because it's like, yeah, we have the API we are interacting with is Clojure script, but then we are using Rust, we are using Skia with its own Rust Skia bindings library. So it's very, very specific, and even all of those are open source. It's not going to do your work. It's so hard for it. But I think it's been really helpful when learning stuff. So like, how can I do it better? Or at least it has given me more time to learn all the other things, because it's like, I want you to refactor this in this way, because I know that this way is better, for instance, or this is how I did it here, do it in a similar way here. So it gives you more time to learn other things. And as a learning tool, it's been really helpful. But I think that you have to know what you are doing and what you want to accomplish. Because, I mean, Copilot is not going to tell me how to draw multiple strokes on a text. It had no idea. So this is something that I have to think about, I have to try about, I have to like understand, and that's it. And it's not helpful. Maybe in the future it will be helpful, but at this point it's not at all. But it's kind of a, I don't know, let's say a pair programming mate somehow. Yeah.
It's kind of disappointing. I mean, Dan told me yesterday he could vibe code something like Penpot in an hour.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think I'm interested in how, like, right at the very start, right, you said, I'm not a designer, I can't do design. But, you know, all the way through, we're kind of going back and forth between these two kind of developer languages and then designer languages. I always think about like stroke, and that feels like designer, and then border feels like developer.
That's right.
You know?
That's right. And now that you mention it, yeah, that's totally right. It's like, I'm not a designer, but I know how to use design tools. So maybe the outcome is not perfect because there are some, like, I don't know, like feelings that I don't know. But about the tooling, I like it, and I use it for. I mean, I've been using Inkscape for a long time, which is it's fun because in the open source world they say that Inkscape is the design tool for developers, and I think that I kind of agree because I actually like the Inkscape UI. But yeah, it's like, what's a stroke? What's a fill? What means text styling? If you've been only doing, I don't know, yeah, databases or real-time analytics, maybe you are not that familiar with strokes or drop shadow or with a shader. So yeah.
You're a designer, really. I think that's what it is.
I try to use. Now, one of the components is, of course, the rendering, and that's something we talked about today as well. And the other bit that actually is a big challenge, I think, in performance of a tool like Penpot is the collaboration. Like how many people at the same time using the tool. Like how do you scale that? How do you make sure that like if 50 people work on the same design at the same time, it doesn't actually slow down for everybody?
I don't like, because it's going to depend also as well on the computer of everyone. I don't know what's the limit of people that can be collaborating at the same time, because I don't know. Sometimes I am myself in different screens collaborating within myself, and it's like 5 Elenas working on a Penpot file, but I don't know what's the limit. I think that the real limitation could be like, because at the end the render, that part is only going to happen on the machine, on the host of the user that is interacting with that. So if someone else is, let's say, painting or working on something that is not visible to you, this is not going to directly affect to your experience because it's not going to be rendered. So it's going to be rendered to the screen of the person that was doing that. The hardest part, I guess, it's synchronization, but that happens in the backend side, and I don't really, for example, know how can impact performance in that sense. But I for what I see is that when you're working with a design, you can see as a designer when the changes that you have done have been updated into the file, because sometimes it can, and it happens quite fast, but you have this feedback which is super useful. And I don't know when was that implemented, but it can happen that design just takes a bit to be saved into the database, and maybe if you refresh before it happens, then you're going to see the other version. You can also like have to get through the previous version and so on, but we have this kind of feedback. So I don't know if with too many people it's something that maybe can take longer, but it shouldn't that much. And at the same time, you have this visual feedback about what is going on. So I said that in terms of rendering, what you're seeing is what is being rendered in your machine. So it shouldn't affect that much in that sense.
And I guess the benefit of doing a renderer like that is that you actually have as you said, the JSON object of like the different states all the time and just re-render it rather than just storing a bitmap of the thing. Exactly. I remember PSD files just had like thousands of bitmaps in them, and that's why it became huge. And in this case, it would not be the thing, and Illustrator did it differently. So that's why Illustrator files were always, the AI files were always a lot smaller.
I mean, it's a challenge. It's a challenge in any case. So it actually can happen that someone uploads a really huge image, which is something that we are not like explicitly limiting, because in the end, it's not like in a website that maybe you can do this kind of lazy loading and so on, which is something that we are going to add here in terms of like when importing or moving the canvas while rendering the image. But in the end, in your design, we assume that if you load a very high quality image, it's because you want this to be there. Imagine that you want to export it in HTML. I mean, you want to see that. So it's not only a performance thing in terms of how you interact with the design, but how you want the outcome to be, and how you explain that, or you allow the user to do that in the platform.
Cool. Well, I mean, we didn't have a tech talk today, but are there tech talks around it already, or are you just too busy writing the thing at the moment that you actually don't have time to actually write slides about it either?
I don't, well, not in the short term. You mean about the render or in general?
The render, yeah.
I don't know if this is something that we are going to plan having in the short term, but I'm sure that at some point we will do something, because I think that, I mean, it can be about like a general talk about like the entire migration, but I think that there are very like specific things that can be very interesting for anyone, like what we were mentioning about text. I don't know, like maybe it's interesting for someone what Harfbus is and how Skia uses it and how it loads the font, and when and then how it's looking nice in whatever you're using. So I think, or for me at least, those are funny topics that I would like to see in a technical talk. Like not only like, hey, this is my product, look how cool it is, but like, hey, tell me like your challenges, what you did wrong, what you struggled with the most, what you had fun with, and to me those are like this kind of examples of things that I would like to expect. So I don't know if, yeah, I mean, we also have at Penpot some community hours where we sometimes talk about different topics. We had one a couple of weeks ago about open source development and open source design, which was really interesting. So we are always like showing what we do. So I would expect content on that at some point of different manners, since like from how it works now, how is it going, or just, okay, this is what we need to do for that very specific thing. I don't know.
Cool. You're coming to the Congress? I know Penpot is coming. Are you coming to the Congress to Berlin, or do they keep you in the
I'm
business?
not.
You have to keep coding.
I have to work a lot. I cannot go there and have fun. Yeah, maybe another year. We have the Penpot Fest, which is in October, and in Madrid, which is going to be also really awesome. I'm going to be there. But yes, I'm sad I'm missing the Berlin conference. Yeah, I will go in another year. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that was a lot of information about it. We will send the links out so people can talk to you on GitHub and find out what's going on there. Like, one of the things that, if you had a magic wand that browsers could do for you, what are the things that you struggle with the most in a browser? What's the thing that we have to do better as browser makers themselves?
As a user or as a developer? Like,
As a developer. I mean,
well,
you said you're using Puppeteer. I'm actually surprised that you're not using Playwright, because that's the newer version and that actually seems to be more feature-laden.
We are using Playwright for other stuff, like for visual regression test, which is like, which I mean, it's similar because underneath it uses kind of the same. So yes, but answering your question right now, I think that always. We were talking before about the performance tooling. I guess that's something that allows me to understand them better and tell me like where to go. That would be amazing. Like help me a little bit with that, or even like make it more usable somehow, because sometimes it's hard to like, okay, so I open it, then I can like put it out of the, like in another window, but then I have to like select this part. Sometimes for me it's too hard, especially because I think that it's not something that maybe I do every single day. I guess that when you get used to it, it gets easier. But yeah, I think that a more beautiful and intuitive performance tool would be nice.
I remember Firefox had an API that actually allowed you to take a screenshot of a DOM element and get it back as a bitmap. We had to shut that down because of security issues, because people used to take pictures of like password fields and stuff like that. So that's every time we do something beautiful in browsers, the horrible people of the web use it first, and then we have to shut it down again. That's how browser development works, sadly enough. But yeah, that would be something that I find fascinating, that like we got so much insight into the rendering of the browser nowadays, especially with like animation, request animation frame and these kind of things. We got the basics sorted there, but the getting to the rendered bitmaps of the browser would be a thing. Because I mean, the thing about Penpot is like I have a CSS panel where I can then write CSS and it renders it back to the design. So I'm seeing in the future with CSS moving really fast at the moment, there's more and more features coming that will be hard to catch up with. So that would be something where the browser could help a bit more. But let's see what the browser makers will do about that. I guess we're kind of out of time. We actually talked a lot and had a lot of details there. It was really fun talking to you, and it was really great to see somebody so excited about their features, and especially the hardcore bits that everybody else shies away from. So thanks very much, Elena. Any last words from you? Anything you want from the audience, from Coffee with Developers to help you with?
Yes, yeah, I don't know if you're curious about any of the things that we are doing. We are like very transparent in that way. You can check issues, you can check discussions, you can contribute in many different ways, not only like through pull requests, but also in our community forum, which, I mean, there are people like discussing very different topics, features that they would like to have. So I encourage anyone to join to that discussion, even if you are not like super technical developer, but if you are into product design and I want to like, I don't know, like ask about how we are doing something internally, or you want to know about a specific feature, just feel free to go to the forum or whatever and participate and take a look to what we are doing.
Well, thanks very much. This was Elena Torró, Chief Pixel Renderer at Penpot. And with that, thanks for watching, and hopefully you can contribute to Penpot's success in the future as well. Thanks very much.